financially in the next 6 months or so, validating everything Ron Paul has said, and we win by just having him in there. And we've got to reach out to people. They're calling mainly seniors and saying, you know, Ron Paul's going to get rid of your Social Security. And he said he wouldn't do that. He would try to create a new system for young people and then phase out the old, which is already bankrupted. They're already stealing your Social Security by devaluing the dollar. That's the thing about these banksters. Look at the austerity in Europe. It's already coming here. But they do have the dependent now. People whose money they took their whole lives, now the government keeps them dependent. And it's disgusting. Vincent, I've got a call to action. I mean, we need to get everybody to New Hampshire because, as you said, wherever you had boots on the ground, he won. But in the areas where folks are living in la-la land, you were unable to. But I think it's more than that. I think it's also fraud because there's a lot of old-timers and people that also support Ron Paul.
Well, I also want to mention that during the final vote count in my precinct, we had precinct captains that were there to specifically witness the vote count. So at least in my precinct, in the precincts that we had 1 through 5, which was at the junior high, the same location, we can say there was no voter fraud there, and the reason being because we were right there to witness it, and we was also there to witness the chairman call into the state GOP to announce the results of that those precincts. Now, in the rural areas where we don't have precinct captains to witness the votes, there's a big possibility that there could be election fraud there because there's none of our people there to witness the vote. So, I can say it didn't happen in my precinct, but out in the rural areas, it is possible.
All right. Well, we've also had all these analysts and people bragging about it, so they're very arrogant. Thank you so much, Vincent. Jonathan in Iowa, you're on the air. Thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Good morning, brother. I'm calling from Johnston, Iowa.
Welcome.
I'm in Camp Dodge at the moment. My MOS is 11 Bravo Infantry, National Guard. I smell vote fraud. Man, are they disgusting for cutting off that live feed off of my fellow military brother. The minute he mentioned Israel and the issues of the useless war, he mentioned, something that kind of woke me up. And I realized, the media is full of crap. And I smell vote fraud all over this. I think it's bullshit. Recently, Alex...
sir, we got to let you go. I appreciate your call, but we can't sit there and just delay people out. We cannot use profanity here on the show, okay? And if you want to get cut off, that's the best way to do it. Let's go to another call in Iowa. I understand you're angry. We're on FCC stations, FCC controlled. Alaric in Iowa, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually, I think, in the same junior high as caller before last. I was watching Districts 7 and 9. It seemed really fishy the way things were going on. The representatives only got 1 minute to vote. People who had caucused before said that they had seen in years past where there was actually a debate that went on. That was not allowed this time. Instead of having hands raised, there was a ballot process where you actually handed in your ballot.
Yeah, no, you stay there. Exactly. They did everything different this year, and that's the big, giant red flag. Stay there. Be tracking this more coming up in the next segment with the premier election fraud expert, Bev Harris. And I know that she's hot on the trail of this Iowa situation with New Hampshire coming up as well. It's clearly there fraud 4 years ago with Ron Paul. He won New Hampshire. I was here in Travis County at the vote processing center where the votes came in. We'd put them in stacks with the Scantrons and put them in the computer. And I talked to everybody at the tables. Pat Buchanan was probably getting 50, 60% of the vote, maybe even more. It was incredible. And it was all over the city, and he got a couple percentage points. And so sometimes they do just completely engage in fraud. People say, oh, Austin's liberal. The people keep voting to hand all their property over and to let the city rob them. No, I've been to the state level. You can pull it up in the LexisNexis archives. Well, the 1998 election, I challenged the Travis County election. And the state came out, did an investigation, and certified that there were serious problems and anomalies, and that the votes weren't done properly, but that still they were going to certify the election. And that was in a separate election from the Buchanan one in '96. So I've seen it. People say, well, then why do you support elections? It's not total fraud everywhere. Austin, there's no voting. I can tell you, bottom line where I live, a dirty lion mafia runs things that act like limp-wristed liberals. They're not. They're hardcore savages. They know exactly what they're doing. They've dominated us. They've usurped us as a wealthy area. They're sucking us dry. Now, Iowa's old-fashioned hand-raising, and that's why they were so worried Paul could win. And in every ground level, he was probably going to get 50%. I mean, you've seen the numbers coming in. Where they couldn't cover it up, he was getting 50, 60%. But just what this caller said, and that's been confirmed, they didn't have the old hand-raising where people could have numbers. They said, write it down, give it to us, and do it quick, and we're going to call a secret location. Now, if that isn't fraud, I'll eat my hat. Let's go back to Alaric. Alaric, finish your point, sir.
Well, after they counted up the votes, I went up there and got pictures of both precincts, tried to upload it to transparentvote.net. The site was down.
Yeah, it was just getting too much traffic. Yeah, well, they tried. Next time it'll be bigger, I'm sure.
But I did notice while we were out there, because even though I'm not an Iowa voter, I brought somebody from Iowa to come in and vote. I had been involved with the training. That really wasn't enough from Ron Paul. As Ron Paul supporters, we needed to do more. We really did where we were. Ron Paul only got a total of 16 votes between the two precincts that I watched, and Romney came in with 30 of all things.
All right. But you're saying different procedure this year, and that raises red flags. Thank you, Alaric. Let's go to Tim in Iowa. Tim, give us your view.
Hello, Alex?
Yes, sir.
Yes, this is Jim, but hey, thanks for taking my call, sir. Thanks for waking me up and getting me turned on to Ron
Thank
Paul.
you. Did you say Jim? Because my screen says Tim.
Jim, actually. Jim, J-I-M.
Okay, go ahead, sir. We don't have much time.
Okay, sure. Paul came in 20 in my precinct. Gingrich had 19. Romney had 34, and then 31% Santorum. I didn't see any fraud at all. We were allowed to watch them count, everything like that. They did the caucus the same way as always, as far as I know. The Republicans.
Yeah, that's what I've been seeing is that it varied this time from place to place. Is that normal?
Well, normally Republicans just have you fill out the ballot or do a show of hands, but they don't debate it like the Democrats do. But can I give you my take?
Yeah.
In Coram, in Iowa, we had this gay marriage that was forced on us by the Supreme Court, and a lot of people are very angry about that. If you look at the map of counties that voted against the gay marriage judges, they pretty much fit right with the counties that Santorum won. So he brought this up as a hot button issue that didn't get any coverage by the media. He ran a self-campaign, and he brought out a lot of church-going folks to vote for him, but it was really a protest vote against the gay marriage.
Yeah, and it just becomes a political football. Interesting point. All right, so you don't think that was fraud. Interesting. I hope that's the case. We'll be right back. Okay, we're going to continue with callers from Iowa, eyewitnesses, what you saw. Most of the callers are saying they believe that there was some type of fraud. They say that the majority of people that they witnessed were voting for Ron Paul in the caucuses. We're also have callers saying that normally they raise their hands and it's publicly tallied, but in some of the precincts they were writing it down and giving it to them as ballots. We know they moved it to a secret location. We're going to continue with your calls throughout this hour with Bev Harris. She's author of the book Black Box Voting, an expose on electronic voting. And she, of course, helped put together the hit film on HBO, the documentary about black box voting. And we'll be talking about her website and more today. But she's the lady that exposed fraud in multiple states like Iowa. She's helped get people to testify before legislatures, whistleblowers from inside. She has proven election fraud. This is going on, and it's so cartoonish how bad it is. But Iowa has the good old-fashioned way of hands raised, and so it's harder to do. But we do have a caucus-by-caucus breakdown of what ended up happening with this. And with Romney and Santorum, there was only a difference of, 8 votes, supposedly, if you believe that. And a few thousand with Ron Paul. Very, very interesting to see this happening. And so, the fact is we know this stuff exists. Now, Ron Paul is saying, hey, third place, almost, a dead heat with the others. That's not shabby. And it's not. But undoubtedly, Bev, let's go back in time. Because you covered New Hampshire. You've gone all over the country. You've caught people, dumping stuff in the dumpsters, cover-ups, you name it. Going back 4 years ago, I remember clear evidence of fraud in New Hampshire with Ron Paul. But overall, looking at this out of the gates, I know it's just a few hours after the results came out, 12 hours or so. What do you see unfolding? What do you see happening?
Well, first we have to be clear what's at stake. In Iowa and in New Hampshire, it's not about who wins. It's about expectations. If you do better than expectations, the story is that you're coming on strong as a candidate. The money flows in. If you do worse than the expectations, then the story becomes, well, you're not doing so well, and you're probably gonna fade away. What I expect is going to be, what I'm worried about in New Hampshire is that it is New Hampshire, not Iowa, where they're going to really do the work on this thing. They're going to basically, and this is just my opinion, my constitutionally protected opinion, but what I think they're going to do is try to award Romney such a large, massive win that they can then make the story, he's inevitable, why even bother to have more caucuses, they're expensive, or more elections or more primaries, they're expensive, let's just get it over with, let's get the other candidates out of the race, it's going to be Romney, Romney, Romney. With Ron Paul in New Hampshire, what I expect to see is for them to hammer him down a good bit so that the story can then be, well, he didn't do as well as is expected. I guess, he's fading out.
And New Hampshire's easier. New Hampshire's easier because that's electronic machines in most of the districts. In Iowa, it's very, very hard. But there is a spot in Iowa where they could engage in manipulation, though. But let's continue with New Hampshire and then go back to what you see in Iowa.
Okay. Yeah, New Hampshire is really, really, really a concern for me right now. Even more so than in 2008 when we caught him in the act of tampering with the recount in 2008. New Hampshire is run on electronic counting machines. Now, interesting because there's about 330 jurisdictions, and about a third of those actually do publicly hand count their ballots, but the other 2/3 count on these electronic debold voting machines, which are programmed by a couple of guys, one of whom is a convicted narcotics trafficker. They're just a couple of private guys. They're not even working for the government or anything. They're just a couple guys that work with an organization called LHS Associates, which is tiny, and it's out of Massachusetts. So they've got all the voting machines basically controlled by these two guys. They can have their way with those. What we saw in 2008 that was fairly interesting is there was a discrepancy between the hand count locations and the machine count locations. So that's one thing to watch for. But the other thing that I'm very concerned about New Hampshire right now is they have disabled the ballot stuffing safeguard. And let me explain that for a minute. The ballot stuffing safeguard is simply this. You count how many people showed up to vote, and you count how many votes there were. Now, in Swansea, New Hampshire,